Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowered to Live. I am your host, Angie Rose Butler, of Becoming Women's Network. I'm so glad to be here today and to be semi pain free. Yay! So, as you've been following me on this journey, it's been almost 2 months of almost constant pain, but I think the doctor found the right combination yesterday. So we're doing good today. So y'all keep me in prayer that this thing lasts, and that when I get through this medication, that we'll be okay. So that's the prayer right now. That's the hope that that's where we're going to be, and so I'm just super excited to be here and to wrap up our series on faith in action. And today we're going to be talking about vision and legacy. And before we get started, let's know that this is a podcast where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. And so again, we're again talking about vision and legacy. And so over the past few weeks, we've been talking about how to live out our faith in practical ways, how it shows up in our habits, our obedience, and in our everyday life. And this remembers faith in action. So we have to put our faith in action. Yesterday, I was even thinking about this, and I was, and the thought that came to mind is like with faith, you got to put your money where your mouth is. We say it, but are we actually doing it? Are we putting our money where our mouth is? Are we saying, yes, I believe, yes, I have faith, yes, this, but then does it carry the weight of, of our money? Because, money is important to us, and, people mess with your money, uh, you'll fight. And so are you fighting for your faith? Are you fighting for the faith that you say that you believe in? And if not, this is the day, the time to start to get moving and putting your faith in action. So we're talking about legacy, and what does that look like? To put to build a legacy on our faith. So because faith in action is not just about today, it's about tomorrow. It's about the imprint that you're leaving. What do you want to leave behind? How do you want to be remembered? I can't remember who it was, and they had a sermon years ago, at least maybe 20 years ago, and he talks about living in the dash. So between the day you're born and the day you die, that's our life is that dash in between. And so how do we want that dash to be remembered? What kind of impact are we wanting to make with the dash of our life? What are we leaving behind? And so, Proverbs 29:18 say, where there is no vision, people perish. And, we've talked about, Habakkuk, he talks about writing the vision and make it plain so that those who come behind you can run with the vision that we are leaving behind. And so, what is important to you? What will be important to the family, the people that remember you? What kind of impact do you want to have on the generation that comes up behind you? What do you want them to remember you by? And what kind of legacy are you leaving? So vision is not about pressure. So this isn't about putting a pressure on you. It's not about another expectation. It's not another, another job, another role. It's none of those things. It's about direction. Without vision, we drift. We slide between things, and every good idea, we chase after it. But when we have vision, your why, if you would. So your vision is your why. What is the vision that you have? What's the thing that is before your eyes that you see? So without vision, we react instead of respond. This is where we somebody says something, and we pop off because we don't have vision. And so we are, I think as Paul talks about, we are tossed with every wind and doctrine. So we float between things, and every little good idea and every little scheme and every other multi-level marketing thing or whatever the next, cryptocurrency, whatever, we just float between, oh, that sounds good, oh, that sounds good. And we're not anchored in anything. So vision anchors you in purpose. We're not chasing after stuff. We can be like, I know where I'm going. Again, that GPS. So you have a destination in mind, and that destination will keep you on track when you know where you're going. Even when there are detours, there's still a destination in mind, and that's that vision. That's your why. That's the thing that anchors you. I know I need to get to, like Bugs Bunny used to say, I'm on my way to Milwaukee. And so when we know we're on our way to Milwaukee or wherever you want to go, let's pick something warm. It's still wintertime. So, so wherever it is that you are heading, your why, and that keeps you driven. So again, when detours come, when distractions come, you're like, nah, I'm this is where I'm going. This is where I'm heading. I'm not going to go to the right or to the left, even if I need to go out. There are roadblocks, or there's an accident along the way. Stuff happens because life happens. And it may be a slowdown because of an accident. There may be a slowdown, because of somebody else's choice, but you still know that you have a destination that you're heading to. And so that vision helps you to respond without reacting. Without vision, we live day to day without anchoring our lives on the eternal. So our ultimate destination is heaven. That's the ultimate. That's the ultimate. That's what we want to get to. That's the ultimate place. But in the in between time, there is a life. There is purpose for us to head towards, that we're working towards, that we're making the impact on the here and now. And that here and now, where we get to that last day, and he was just like, did you feed me when I was hungry? Did you clothe me when I was naked? Did you visit me while I was in prison? Did you give me a glass of water? Did you do all of these things? Because like, yeah, because I made an impact. I opened that door for someone, and I made an impact. you know I touched lives while I was here for the good, because we can touch lives and it not be good. So we want to make sure that the lives that we're touching, the impact that we're making, is that we're remembered for the good that we do, and not just because we showed up. So when our faith is paired with vision, our steps begin to align with purpose. Again, so faith, it's just like our, this where our faith meets purpose, and purpose fuels freedom. Freedom, that liberty that we have in Christ, because we know where we're going. And so we're walking in that moment. We're not hindered by any of those things. So vision isn't about building a platform. Right? We talked about that a little bit about this last week. It's not about building a platform. It's about building a life, and a life that is impactful, a life that leaves an imprint on somebody's heart, and somebody's, remember, when we are kind to other people, that leaves an impact, that leaves an imprint on their lives, and in their memories, of who you are. So legacy isn't built overnight. So this is not going to happen. This is not a like one of those get rich quick schemes. It's about continual building. It's about laying foundation, and sometimes that laying of foundation. And before you can lay the foundation, you have to drill deep, and you have to go deep, deeper, and the higher the building, the deeper you have to go. So if you know that the legacy that God has laid on your heart, that vision is something that is huge, make sure that you are deeply, deeply rounded and grounded in Him and in that purpose, because life is going to happen. And making sure that your foundation, we talked about this um, maybe 2 weeks ago, about our root system. Are we going down in the times of drought? Are we reaching down, or are we trying to go out and touch other people and do other things without going deep? Because that's what's going to keep your tree. It's going to keep the house up, is when we go deep. So it's not built overnight. It's not, but it's formed through our daily choices. What are we doing daily? What are you building on? You know, and where faith in action becomes powerful because it's about our choices every single solitary day. Sometimes we don't always like the choices that we have to make, but we got to make them if we want to make impact. And because faith doesn't ask, what am I doing today? Faith asks, what am I building long term? Are my choices aligning with who I say I want to become? I used to tell my kids when they were younger, you know, the friendships that you keep, the decisions that you make, don't just impact you today. They impact you in long term. There are people in prison. I was reminded of this. I said people are in prison today because of one decision. They reacted versus waiting and responding. They made a snap decision, and it ended them. It changed their lives forever. And so when we are thinking about the legacy, sometimes it's in the pausing that legacy is built. You know, just because somebody said something. When people are in prison today because it was like, oh, they called me a name. Oh, they looked at me funny. And I'm like, okay, so they have eyes. you know, just because somebody says something to you doesn't mean you have to answer to it. That's not who you are. That's not what's on your birth certificate. So you don't have to respond. You don't have to react to what they say. It's in the pausing, in the stopping and thinking, okay, who am I? And what legacy am I leaving behind? What do I want to be remembered for? Do I want to make a snap decision that changed my life negatively? Or am I going to pause, breathe, and then respond? Because sometimes it's not, in the pausing, sometimes they're like, you know what, it's not even worth it. It's not even worth it. My kids were like, why are you always so bothered? You know, my kid, my youngest, she always says stops at me, and I'm like, okay. And she goes, why are you like this? And I'm just like, because I am, you know. And so she was not nothing majorly mean, but she would say stuff, and I'm like, okay. And I said, okay, that's your opinion, okay. And she was like, stop doing that. And I was like, what? I know who I am. And so whatever you say, or sometimes like I'm like, you know what, you're right. I am this, but that's okay. And she was like, stop being like that. Stop doing like that. She goes, why are you this way? Because I understand impact. I understand legacy. And so just because you say something, I don't need to necessarily respond to what you say. I don't necessarily need to move in the way that you say. Jacqueline Carr, that she has a song, and she was just like, when the devil says I'm this, I know that I'm not that, and if he says I am this, I know that I'm not that. And so that is how we have to live our life. That's legacy. That's a legacy. Are we aligning our choices with who we want to become? Are your habits reinforcing your values? What values are you trying to reinforce? What are you looking for? Is my faith shaping the way I speak, love, forgive, give, and lead? Is my faith look at it, does my faith show up in all of those things in all the areas of my life? So faith in action is not dramatic most days. It's the quiet getting up, moving through your day. It looks like showing up consistently. This podcast, through pain, through sickness, through all the things, showing up, showing up, Thursday after Thursday after Thursday after Thursday, showing up. And in about 3 months, you know, 2 years, consistency. Did I always want to do it every Thursday? Absolutely not. There were days I'm just like, Lord, I just want to lay in this bed and just want to curl up and just want to be all over, but consistency, showing up because I recognize that God, this is something that God called me to. This is something that I have been doing, one here, one here. But God was just like, no, we need you to be consistent, speaking life, into a wider audience that I could reach with this one person here on the job or whatever, at church or wherever somebody reached out to me, one of my kids' friends, that was like, hey, so and so said for me to call you because giving life, giving life. We were out this past Saturday at an event, and one of the little boys, they were playing tug of war with the little ones, the babies, and his team didn't win, and he was sad about that. And so it was showing up consistency, about being who I am always am. And so when he saw me, he recognized me, and so his mom brought him over, and I was like, why are you sad? And he was like, we lost. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, did you do your very best? And he was like, yes. And I said, well, because you did the best that you could, that makes you a winner. Just because the overall team did not win, you are an individual winner because you showed up. You did your very best that you could possibly do. And he's like, I said, and because you did your very best, that makes you a winner. He showed up. I said, did you use all your muscles? I mean, he's little. I'm like, did you use all your muscles? He was like, I did. And I was like, and so, yes. I said, so your muscles got stronger and you did your very, very, very best. Then you, guess what you are? You are a winner because you showed up. And he was like, yes, I'm a winner. And I was like, yes, you are. I said, the team did not win, but because you showed up and you did what you were supposed to do, that makes you a winner. You tried with everything that you had, and just because the team didn't win, you still won because you gave it your best. You showed up. And the same with you. You may not look like you're winning, but if you're showing up every day, being consistent, doing what you know you're supposed to be doing, giving it your all, just because the overall does not look like you won, you are winning because you're showing up. And consistency is what's going to win. Consistency is what's going to make the difference in the person who is like, oh, I tried it, it didn't work. You keep pushing, you keep doing, you keep building that muscle of consistency. And that's where impact is going to happen because people are watching and they're going to see you showing up. And that's where your gifts are going to make room for you because you showed up consistently. And this is where you're going to win. Again, it's not about, the platform, speaking to 10,000 people or whatever. It's about showing up. And the people will come when you show up. But you have to show up. And you have to show up every day. And you have to show up recognizing that if you're speaking to one person or you're speaking to 10,000, you're making a difference. You're making that impact. And so you have to choose to show up consistently. Choosing integrity. That's a big one. And that's showing up when no one is watching. Are you doing the right thing for the right reason? And showing up with integrity. Are you praying when you don't feel like it? Again, these are the little things that we were like, oh, that doesn't matter. But yes, but it does. Praying in all seasons and all times, you know, showing up in prayer, showing up with integrity, showing up consistently, staying faithful in the unseen when no one is watching. When you're in the shadows. Can people count on you in the shadows? Because that's going to be important because if people can count on you in the shadows when you come into the light and God finally brings you into the light, or how are you going to show up? Don't despise those small beginnings. So whatever, being faithful over the little, when you're faithful in those areas, then when you show up in a big way, you're going to be faithful. It's going to carry over because you're building that muscle. Just like I told him, I said, you're building muscle because you showed up, you give it your all. The same way when you're in the background, are you good and showing up faithfully in the background? When it's time for you to shine, then you'll show up faithfully and consistently with integrity when you're in the light. So that's how legacy is formed. Not through not through somebody clapping for you, because sometimes people are not gonna clap for you, but it's through obedience. How are you showing up? Are you showing up in the little things again? Are you waiting, for when you come into the light? Because again, if you're not faithful when you're in the background, you're not going to be faithful when you're in the light. So let that sink in, let that take root in you, that God is preparing you right now. He's preparing you in the background so that you can show up and shine brightly without your light dimming and with integrity when He moves you. So, what are some of the common hindrances for us? Fear of long term thinking. We don't want to think long term because we're afraid to dream big. We're afraid to dream long term because we're not sure if we can sustain it. You know, with this, when things happen and life happens, what I have to do is I pre-record. And you may have seen pre-recordings. When I go to physical therapy right now, the pain is too much. So when I know that I go to physical therapy, I'm going to be no good when I finish. And I just want to go to bed. I'm going to have the seating pad. I want to take my drugs, and I'm going to go to sleep because that's what I have to do. And so I pre-record, and because I'm being consistent. So when I'm good before I go, I'm building long term. I'm building long term. When I travel, and I know I'm traveling, and I know I won't have internet or whatever. But even when we were traveling and we were coming across the United States and across Mexico and all those things, I was in that car in the dark with my phone. I'm like, hey, we're going live. I just wanted to check in and say, hey, I am still here. The same thing with my ordination. When I was going through the ordination process, the same thing. And we were driving across country, we had ordination classes, and I was on my phone, and I was just like, hey, I'm here. I can't turn my camera on because I don't have battery power for all of that, but I'm present. I'm here. I can answer. I can speak, and I am here. And so when we think about sustaining, you have to do what you have to do in order for you to do what you have to do. We worry about failure. When I messed up and my first few months of podcasts were deleted by Facebook because I didn't understand the process at the time, you know, I could have been like, you know what, forget it. I lost almost 2 months of episodes. I can't get those back. They're just gone. But I kept going, you know. So because I needed to maintain the vision, I didn't say, well, what if I can't do this? What if I keep, messing up? And there are moments that I still do, that I still have issues, So, but the vision isn't about guaranteeing the outcome. It's about trusting God with the process. God is in control. And He was like, you keep going. This is what I laid on your heart. This is what I'm pushing you to do. This is what I've been pushing you to do. You didn't want to do it, but now here we are. And we're going to keep pushing. We're going to be consistent. We're going to keep showing up. We're going to keep living. We're going to keep pushing forward. We're going to keep doing what God says no matter what. So I'm trusting Him with the process. Feeling unqualified. Oh, that's a big one. I sure felt unqualified because when I tell you, getting in front of this camera, whoo. Mm. And so sometimes, we want to shrink from the vision because of the fact that we feel unqualified to move forward because we think, I'm not good for this. I'm unprepared. I'm inexperienced. I'm not enough. But God showed me, He was just like, you are enough the way you are. The way you show up, the way you are demonstrating my power. And so God never required qualification before obedience. He builds capacity as you walk. He's building you up as you're walking through this. Sometimes we confuse vision with achievement. So vision is not about, it's not about collecting achievements. It's about alignment, that you can achieve and still feel empty if your actions are rooted in purpose. If you're not walking in your purpose, and we see it every day, we see people who are talented, who have got accolades, they've got the money, they've got the prestige, they've got a big platform, they're in movies, they worth millions of dollars, and they still end their lives because of the fact that they didn't have a vision. They had no vision. They were achieving and people were applauding, but they were empty on the inside. And so we will need to fill ourselves up and recognize that we need that vision, that it has to be rooted in purpose. It's not just about winning, it's about showing up consistently. It's about making impact. It's about knowing your why. And your why can't just be, oh, I want to make millions of dollars. Okay. And so once you achieve it, what's next? Where do you go from there? What happens, when the millions of dollars go away? Are you are you still making an impact? Um, Discouragement whispers. It's not happening fast enough. It tells you consistently doesn't matter. It tempts you to give up. But legacy grows slowly, and God builds through consistency. So don't get discouraged when it doesn't seem like it's happening fast enough. You keep showing up. You keep doing what you know you're supposed to be doing. And so, what are some of the ways that we can shift our perspective? So, vision anchors our decisions. So, when you know the direction that God is calling you towards, I remember that GPS, we're heading to Milwaukee, uh, it becomes easier to say no to distractions. It's easier for us to remind ourselves about where we're going, what we're doing, even when we have detours and distractions and stuff happens and life happens and all these things happen. Our decision is still, I want to keep moving forward, because that's where impact happens. Legacy grows through obedience. So small acts of faithfulness compound over time. It's not going to be, oh, I made a decision. Oh, I prayed today. Oh, I showed up today. Oh, I had a podcast today. But then we don't show up again for another 2, 3 weeks. We never pray again. We're never obedient again to what God is showing us. Life happens and we give up. But God builds through, again, faithful, small acts, over compounded over time. Just keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. About exercising and building those muscles. You got to keep going. Sometimes it hurts and we want to give up, but we got to keep working. We got to keep building. We got to keep building until, we can lift more. We can walk further. We can run further. We can do more sit-ups, push-ups, planks, whatever it is. The same thing with our vision, with our why. As we're consistent, it gets easier, we get stronger, the distractions get less and less, because we are moving forward and we don't give up as easily as we did in the past. So God builds through consistency. So the seeds you plant today through prayer, integrity, service, love, become the harvest that you may not see right now, but others will. Just like that farmer, when you put a seed in the ground, we don't automatically, get fruit. You plant it, you got to water it, you got a little seedling, then you get a shoot, and then you get a little bush, and then after that it keeps growing. It may take years before you see fruit, but you got to be consistent. You got to nurture what you started in order for you to be able to see the fruit in the future. You're not going to get an apple tree, apples right away. It's got to grow first, and then you receive the fruit of your labor. So be patient. So God is building that. Faith in action today becomes legacy tomorrow. That apple tree, that doesn't just bear one apple from the seed that you plant. You have multiple apples that's going to continually grow and give fruit, for those that come before you. And I wrote this the other day, and I put it in my journal. It says, those who can grow from the pain of yesterday can be trees for those who need shade today. So you may have experienced pain, you may have experienced trauma, you may have experienced whatever, your consistency, your why, that is, you growing today to be shade for somebody tomorrow. Somebody be able to eat from the tree that you planted when you're consistent. So that's your legacy. So challenge for this week. I want you to write a faith-centered vision statement, not a success statement, not a productivity plan, but a statement that answers, how do I want to live? That's the first thing. What kind of character do I want to embody? And what kind of faith do you want to be known for? And what values will shape your decision? So write it down, make it personal, make it prayerful. So again, the questions you're answering in that statement is, how do I want to live? What kind of life, how am I display my values? What kind of character do I want to embody? What kind of faith do I want to be known for? What values are shaping my decisions? And then write it down, make it personal. It's not about somebody else, but it's about you. So let it guide you, no pressure. For my writers, who are journal, take some time, some quiet time, and reflect on these questions. What legacy do I want my faith to leave? What's the legacy do I want to leave behind? And what choices am I making right now that are shaping that legacy? And are my daily habits aligned with my long term vision? So don't rush it. Let it settle. Listen. Again, sitting prayerfully. Sitting in the quiet, and let your spirit inform you on those decisions that you're making each and every day. Right. So I want to thank you all again for rocking me through this series, Faith in Action. If you missed any of the episodes, you can visit our our YouTube channel and being able to watch it there on YouTube. When you get there, like, share, subscribe, and that makes it important. And if you want to catch kind of like the mini versions of this, if you want to sign up for our newsletter as well, Purpose in Motion, you can do that by going to the website and signing up for that. But again, you can always catch the replay on our YouTube channel at Becoming Woman's Network. And I want to thank you all again for joining me for this. So it's about, when our direction, we take an action. So faith in action isn't about perfection. We're not going to get there overnight. It's about waking up each day and choosing to live in alignment with God's vision for your life. And so whatever God placed on your heart, you're not going to see the full picture, but He gives you just enough light for the step that you're on. And you may not know all the steps, you may not know all the details. Just like when you're traveling, you go from point A to point B. You don't always know what's happening. You don't know what accidents, you don't know what detours, but you're going to continue and keep moving and keep pushing forward in obedience. And that know that God is building one day at a time, one step at a time. And then when you look back, you will recognize that those small steps turn into something big and beautiful, and you will be leaving a legacy behind you that is going to make an impact for for generations to come. And I don't want to leave on today too without also shouting out my logo. So super excited about that logo that I've got. Thank you, Glenn, for the awesome work. She's got a couple different iterations of the logo. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And remember, faith in action today becomes legacy tomorrow. Thank you for walking with me, and remember to stay empowered.